So, there's this character in the game, League of Legends, named Taliyah, right? In case you don't know much about her, she's an earthbender from a desert and is one of those super friendly types who sees the best in everyone. She was training with some random wind dude in the mountains of Ionia, 'cause elements and balance and stuff, when she heard some rumors about the ancient emperor of Shurima, who had been dead for thousands of years, except apparently not dead now, and making people slaves? So she booked her way home to try to find her family. Cool. But we ain't here to talk about her. We're here to talk about Boulder Girl's cousin, Vekt. Back in her tribe when they were kids, they were inseparable, which is a poor choice of words because that's exactly what they became separated. Rip. They were a nomadic people, which means they traveled from place to place instead of living in one spot. However, when he was 8 or so, Vekt's parents decided to settle down in the town of Kennethet. His mom had lost the use of her legs after an accident, which is a slight inconvenience when you're part of a nomadic tribe. On the promise that the tribe stopped there once each year, eventually Taliyah and Vekt let each other go. And no, I don't simply mean metaphorically either. It took a good 10 minutes to pry their arms off of each other. Moving on, though, actually, that's precisely what Taliyah did. Move on. Vekt had known that she had a secret that made her somehow different from everyone else in the tribe, though he had no idea what it was. He was worried that she'd be lonely now. However, before he knew it, he had become the lonely one. Taliyah still had the whole tribe, but Vekt? Yeah, he never got along with the local kids. They all treated him as a hillbilly. Sand, dune, Billy, dune, Bobby. They didn't accept him. And frankly, he didn't accept his new life either. He was a traveler at heart, just like his people. He just got increasingly restless. Every time he saw Taliyah again, he felt more and more left behind. Eventually, he decided he was going to go on an adventure by himself, and he collected all the things he could think of needing. A tent, scarves, more scarves. What? Blankets are more suspicious, alright? A couple water pouches, a nice flight from Dad's shelf, a few dozen Drassics, and off he went one day. He picked a direction at random and walked for basically a full day. He was a practiced walker after all. At night, he bundled up tight in his tent with all those scarves wrapped like a muumuu. The second day, he realized he really didn't have enough food to last forever, and he wasn't sure where the nearest town even was. He considered going back, but facing his parents after this? Yeah, no. He went on. That's when things started going south. A sandstorm was approaching from the north, so he turned and hurried in the opposite direction. The closer it got, the more panicked he became, and soon he was running as fast as his legs would take him, too scared to even look back. He ran for what felt like an eternity. Eventually, he couldn't run any longer and collapsed in the sand. He rolled onto his back, and the skies were as clear as could be. After several minutes, Vekt found his way back to his feet and looked around. He was definitely nowhere he had ever been in his travels before. Still sand, but also rock. Big rocky cliffs and outcrops. An abyssal ear-piercing screech sounded in the distance. It was only then that he noticed the tunnels gouged through the rock. Inhuman tunnels. Large. Too large. Suddenly, he knew exactly where he was. He had heard of this place. Oh yes, he had heard all about it. And to avoid it at all costs. This was the Sai Khalik, home to the rek'sai, and most terrifyingly, if the rumors held any truth, which Vekt was suddenly all too sure of, rek'sai herself, their queen. In a blind panic, Vekt suddenly had all of his energy back, and he began sprinting in the opposite direction of that fell scream. Soon he heard a rumbling sound behind him, and started whimpering. He tripped over something. A bone? And fell. Rolling onto his back, the setting sun was blotted out suddenly by something enormous flying through the sky. In that instant, all of his fatigue caught up to him, and he knew there was no point in resisting any longer. He closed his eyes. There was a bright flash that didn't seem to fit, and falling. Lights all around, purple, and finally, black. Then he awoke. Something wasn't right. And I mean, besides the fact that he should have been dead. He wasn't in the Sai Khalik anymore. In fact, he was on the floor of some building, and there were people at tables all around him, ignoring him. He managed to stand up, a pounding headache echoing through his skull. He looked at his hands and saw that he had gloves on. Getting a better view of his surroundings, Vekt found a mirror hanging on a wall and walked over to it. He pulled off his hood and stared in shock at the reflection staring back at him. It was still his face, that much he was sure of, but it was not the face of the 11-year-old in the desert from that fateful day. This was the face of an older teenager. Pale white hair, no freckles, and a vicious scar across his left eye. 5 years had passed, but what happened to him? How did he survive? Where is he now? And for goodness sake, why didn't he remember any of it? People had been talking behind him for a while, but he hadn't been listening. One of them tapped him on the shoulder. Vekt instinctively turned and raised his left arm, and a large clay chunk of the wall to his back was launched at the man. He flew back in a swarm of black and purple magics. Vekt stared down at his hands in fear. The room went silent. The man who Vekt suspected to be the owner started yelling at him in a language he didn't understand. Covering his ears, Vekt screamed and the ground trembled beneath them as rocky fissures erupted all around him. Electricity filled the air and all Vekt could see were flashes of purple and darkness with the sounds of screams. He wasn't entirely sure if the screams were coming from his own throat or from the people around him, but he turned and leapt. Why did he leap? He couldn't tell you. But he did a full-on headfirst dive, and as he did, the earth opened up beneath him. And the next thing he realized, he was crouching in some kind of battle stance on the street. He had no memories of the past 5 years, but apparently he had some kind of abilities now, and his body clearly retained the muscle memory to utilize them. But he didn't have the slightest clue as to why. Ever since that day, when he woke up in a Bilgewater tavern, Vekt has been traveling the world of Runeterra, searching for anyone who can give him the answers he longs for.